Have you ever felt like a part of your life was stuck? Like there's something simple that everyone around you seems to do effortlessly, except you? Like something small for others feels like an invisible wall for you. This story is about that. About a woman who couldn't drive. Not because she didn't know how, but because fear stole her courage to try. Maybe in some way you felt that too. Like fear was holding the pen to your story. But what if I told you that sometimes, all we need is the right word at the right time? Hannah got her driver's license at 24. She passed the test, smiled for the photo, and even celebrated with her proud parents. But the license stayed tucked away. First for days, then months, and years. She just couldn't bring herself to drive. Even the thought of going out alone in the car made her hands sweat and her heart race, as if something terrible was about to happen. She avoided the topic, said she preferred public transportation, that traffic was getting worse every day, that cars felt too big for her. But none of that was true. The truth was, there was a voice inside her that whispered, "You won't make it." And over time that voice got louder. Not just when it came to driving, but when it came to making decisions, speaking up at work, or dreaming bigger. It was like fear had moved in and made itself at home. Hannah started living on autopilot. Work, home, groceries, streaming shows at night. Comfortable life, sure, but one without spark, without movement, without new chapters. Like she was waiting for something to change, without knowing what that something even was. Until one day, on her way back from the store, tired and distracted, she opened a video titled, "Don't Hand Your Story Over to Fear." The video started with a simple question. Do you remember who you were before fear convinced you that you couldn't? It hit her like a lightning bolt. It felt like someone had held up a mirror to her soul. The video talked about how fear is a thief of the future, how it disguises itself as protection, but really it's a prison. And it ended with this: maybe all you're missing is courage. And maybe that courage is just one word away. That night, alone in her room, Hannah wrote 3 words on a piece of notebook paper: courage, determination, faith. She stuck it to her mirror and stared at those words like they were a pact. Not a promise of perfection, but an invitation. Fresh start. Sometimes, an entire story begins with a single sentence. If you had to choose 3 words that represent what you need to change your life today, what would they be? Drop them in the comments. Sometimes, just naming what we need is enough to start moving something inside us. The next morning, Hannah woke up earlier than usual. The sky was still dark, and the city was asleep. She made coffee, threw on something comfortable, and grabbed the car keys, the ones that had been buried in the back of a drawer for ages. She went down to the garage, sat in the driver's seat, and stayed there for a long while. Hands on the wheel, eyes closed, heart racing. She didn't start the engine. She didn't go anywhere. But something happened. For the first time, she didn't run. For the first time, she stayed. In the days that followed, Hannah repeated this little ritual. She'd sit in the car, take a deep breath, and allow herself to feel. First, it was only fear. Then slowly, memories surfaced. Phrases she'd heard as a child, offhand comments that somehow became truth inside her. You're just not the type. Maybe driving just isn't for you. Some people never get the hang of it. And all those words carried weight. But now, face to face with her fear, she started questioning them. Were they really true? Or had she just been living inside a story someone else wrote for her? One ordinary afternoon, she finally turned the key. The engine roared to life. The sound was loud, strange, even scary. But familiar. Like life itself was asking, "Ready?" She didn't answer with words. She shifted into reverse and slowly backed out of the garage. She drove to the corner, came back. And when she parked the car, she felt a warmth in her chest she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't pride. It was something deeper. It was the feeling of being alive. Every day she went a little farther. First to the bakery, then the grocery store, then the pharmacy. Each trip felt like a journey. Small on the outside, massive on the inside. And with every turn, Hannah realized it wasn't just the car that was moving forward. It was her soul too. But of course, the path wasn't always smooth. Some days she went back home before even leaving. Other days she cried in the driver's seat, wondering if any of it made sense. But whenever she looked at her bedroom mirror, those three words were still there: courage, determination, faith. And sometimes that was enough to try again the next day. When was the last time you tried something even though you knew you might fail? Maybe it's time to try again. Drop a comment and share. What's the parked car in your life right now? Sometimes naming the fear is the first step to shrinking it. Hannah was finally starting to taste freedom. But like everything worthwhile in life, the journey wasn't made of just wins. One day, a friend invited her to a job interview in a nearby city. It was an incredible opportunity, something she wouldn't have even considered a few months earlier. But now, after all her small victories, it felt possible. Scary but possible. She said yes. The day before, she prepped everything. Mentally walked through the route. Checked the directions on her phone. Filled up the gas tank. Everything was ready. But the next morning, as she sat in the car, something inside her froze. Her chest tightened. Her breath shortened. In a matter of seconds, her mind painted every worst-case scenario. Crash. Breakdown. Wrong turn. A silent judgment. It was like every old ghost came rushing back all at once. She tried to tell herself it was just nerves, that it was fine, but she couldn't do it. She sat there, hands gripping the wheel, for nearly an hour. Then, with tears in her eyes, she got out of the car, went back inside, and called her friend to say she wasn't coming. It was hard. It felt like all her progress had vanished. Like fear had won again. She felt like a fraud. Like she'd been faking bravery that wasn't really there. But that night, looking again at her mirror, something inside her whispered, "You tried. And that alone makes you different from who you used to be." That voice wasn't guilt. It was grace. And maybe that's one of the greatest victories we can claim. Not never falling, but choosing to keep trying even after we fall. The next day, Hannah got in the car again. Not to go far, just to the park, but with a new perspective. She wasn't driving to prove she was brave. She was driving because she knew she was a work in progress. And every attempt was a seed being planted, pointing her toward a new version of herself. Maybe you're expecting too much from yourself. Maybe you're carrying a weight that was never yours to begin with. What if you gave yourself some grace instead? Drop a comment and tell me, what do you need to hear today? To try again tomorrow. With time, Hannah noticed something shifting inside. It wasn't just her confidence behind the wheel. It was how she saw herself. She was no longer the woman who avoided her limits. Now, even with fear, she leaned into them. She tested the edges, challenged what once felt impossible. It all started with the car, but the impact went far beyond that. She started saying yes more. Yes to invites she used to decline. Yes to opportunities at work she used to let slip by. Yes to hard conversations, to coffee dates, to simply leaving the house for no urgent reason. It was like life was finally moving inside her again. Every small act of courage lit up a corner of her soul that had been in the dark. And more than that, she started to feel God in the details. In the peaceful mornings. In the songs that felt like they were written just for her. In the moments when she couldn't explain it, but felt gently guided. She began to pray before driving. Nothing long or formal. Just honest, simple words like, "Give me calm. Show me I can trust." And slowly, it began to feel like she wasn't alone in the driver's seat anymore. Faith started filling the spaces where fear used to live. Not a faith that needed explanations, but the kind that whispers, "Keep going, even if you don't understand everything yet." And the more she drove, the more she realized. It wasn't the car that was moving forward. It was her life. The roads became symbols of her inner journey. Every turn conquered, every trip completed, was a quiet affirmation. She was alive and growing. One day, she decided to drive to that same nearby city. Not for an interview this time, just to visit her cousin. She took it slow. No rush. Stopped along the way for coffee. Breathed in the day. And when she arrived, parked the car and stepped out. She looked around and felt a peaceful kind of pride. She didn't need to prove anything anymore. She was there. And that was everything. Have you ever stopped to think about how small steps can completely change your life? What's the last thing you did that made you feel truly alive? Share it here. Your story might be the spark someone else needs right now. That afternoon in the neighboring city marked a new chapter. Hannah wasn't the same anymore. Something inside her had been rearranged. Not because of some big, dramatic event, but because she chose not to give up on herself on the ordinary days. And that changed everything. She kept driving, now with more ease. Her trips were no longer filled with sweaty palms or spiraling thoughts. They were filled with music she loved, quiet prayers, and sometimes spontaneous smiles when she remembered how far she'd come. But the most beautiful thing, what it started to awaken in others. Friends who knew about her struggle started asking, "How did you do it?" And Hannah didn't offer magic formulas. She simply shared her story. She talked about the note on the mirror, the 3 words, process, the setbacks, and the restarts. One friend was afraid to go back to school after 40. Another was stuck in grief after a divorce. A younger one was drowning in anxiety. And with every conversation, Hannah realized her story was never really about driving. It was about courage. And that sparked an idea to write. She started simply like a journal, then posted a piece online. And the response? Overwhelming. People from all over the country wrote to say, "I feel the same way. I needed to read this. I had no idea fear could hide so well." And for the first time, Hannah understood. The thing that once felt like her greatest weakness was now a well of strength for others. She wasn't a therapist. She wasn't a speaker. She wasn't a coach. She was just a regular woman who got scared, fell down, almost gave up, and still chose to keep going. And that alone, that was powerful, because there's something deeply healing about watching someone just like you, overcome a struggle that feels so familiar. The note was still on her mirror, little yellowed now, the ink faded, but still there. Courage, determination, faith, 3 simple words. But when paired with one choice a day, they rewrote the story of a life. Maybe you're waiting for a big breakthrough, something external, some supernatural force. But what if the shift you're waiting for is actually in how you respond to the fear that visits you? What would happen if you started moving your story forward today? Tell me, what would your first step be? Today, Hannah drives without thinking twice. She goes to work, picks up her nieces from school, takes weekend road trips. But that's just a detail now, because the real change happened inside her. The woman who once hid behind excuses now speaks with clarity. The one who once froze behind the wheel now makes bold decisions. Not because the fear disappeared, but because she finally realized fear doesn't get to write her story anymore. She still has hard days, still feels her heart race sometimes, still hesitates. But now she remembers how much she's already overcome. She remembers who she became through it all. And that's what keeps her moving forward. Because when we decide not to hand our story over to fear, we discover we don't need to be ready to begin. We just need to begin, to become ready. And maybe, as you listen to this story, you're wondering if that could be true for you too. Maybe your fear isn't driving. Maybe it's moving to a new city, ending a relationship, going back to school, forgiving someone, or finally becoming who you really are. But I need you to hear this clearly. It's not too late. The page is still blank, and the pen is still in your hand. You don't have to wait for fear to disappear. You just need enough courage to take one step, even with it still there. Because the truth is, no one writes a beautiful story without scribbles, pauses, or messy chapters. But it's those exact moments that make the ending powerful. And if you ever forget that, come back here. Rewatch this story. Reread your notes. Remember why you started. Because every time you choose to act, even with doubt, you move closer to the life you were meant to live. If this story touched something in you, share in the comments what hit you the most. Sometimes the line that speaks to you might be exactly what someone else needs to read. And if you want to keep hearing stories like this, stories filled with faith, growth, and hope, subscribe to the channel. Because here we believe one thing deeply. No matter where you stopped, it's always the right time to write a new ending.